touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Oh, I ain't getting no sleep. Till I touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping.
I'm hiding all you so lonely. I'm hiding all you so lonely.
Touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Oh, I ain't getting no sleep. Till I touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Oh, I ain't getting no sleep. Till I touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. touch that peak, oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Oh, I ain't getting no sleep till I touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Oh, I ain't getting no sleep till I touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Oh, I ain't getting no sleep till I touch that peak. Oh, I've been grinding all week. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping me. Ain't no stopping.
2.5 hours. That's all it took after months of planning for the US to snatch Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. They called it Operation Absolute Resolve. For months, CIA spy drones had been tracking Maduro's movements. The agency claimed that a human source inside the Venezuelan government tipped them off as well. It started at 11:46 p.m. when Donald Trump gave the order. Step 1. Clear an air corridor. The US military smashed Venezuela's air and aviation defenses. This also included communication centers to take out their air defense systems. This would allow more than 150 US aircraft to be deployed alongside helicopters to carry its elite Delta Force troops tasked with snatching Maduro. It's said then that the lights went out.
Due to a certain expertise that we have, it was dark and it was deadly.
Possibly referring to a cyber attack on the city's grid or a bombing of this power station. By 2:01 a.m., US troops were approaching Maduro's compound in Fuerte Tiuna. A replica of the compound had been built in the US, its plan and security apparently known to the Americans. Gun battles broke out and much of Maduro's security detail were killed. Satellite imagery showing the destruction around the base. In the last moments before Maduro's capture, he tried to run for a safe room, but couldn't close the door in time.
He was trying to get into it, but he got somewhere so fast.
By 4:29 a.m., American Air Forces with Maduro and his wife were taken back to the US Navy ships waiting in the Caribbean. For the US, it was undoubtedly a successful exercise for naked power. It's unclear how Trump will manage Venezuela.
We're going to run the country right. It's going to be run very judiciously, very fairly.
But history has shown it's far from clear.
Far from clear. Very far from clear. Oh my goodness. It's been a small little hiatus, but we are back with Rise of Middle America. I'm AK, your favorite guy, and tonight, ICE has been under fire. The incident in Minnesota, but the tide's turning. Also, with the recent capture of Maduro, how did we get here? As past, present, and future opens Roman Nation 2026 season. So sit back and relax as Rise of Middle America starts now.
I'm hiding, I'll be so lonely.
What's up, America? We're back for Rise of Middle America. Scrap, you are back. The rant, no, not the rant master. This year, El Presidente. How you doing?
I am feeling very well this year. Very well. I have much to rant about. Glad that there's been no Guar Olympias. Just no Guar Olympias.
Oh wait, hold on. I forgot something in my lighting here.
Oh no.
All right, we're back. Yes,
Hey.
still over there. They are still over there. Man, a much needed break for all of us. A much needed break because I mean the end of last year kind of like ran into each other, and then we had all this family stuff, and we were just like, you know what? I think we're just going to take a little bit of a break. Much needed. Yeah. We're refreshed. We're back, and this year we're going harder than ever. Okay, because there's a lot of stuff that's happened over the last couple of days. Hell, even over the past couple of weeks. But we're definitely going to go ahead and get into that. Anything you want to say before we get into our shilling?
I'm just glad to be here this year, because this time last year I was just getting out of the hospital.
Yes.
So grateful for that. Uncharted territory is all I got to say about 26. Like, that's all I got to say. This is uncharted territory, and we're about to figure it out, because people have been fooling around, and some of them are finding out. We're about to talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, if you guys didn't know, please go to riseofmiddleamerica.com and check out our lineup of podcasts from history, news, pop culture, and now sports. And true crime is actually going to be coming back very, very soon. That was one of our biggest hits, right? So I had to make sure that we bring in the year right. We also got a Discord where all the magic for Rise of Middle America happens. You want to be a podcast host, producer, researcher, or writer for us, this will be the only place you can be a part of the fastest growing podcast community. Rumble, YouTube, X, Facebook, you name it. At the bottom of the page are a link to our socials. And at the top, the other way around. At the top, upper right-hand corner, bottom is where you can see our Roman Nation merch. We should have some new merch coming up for you guys soon, so please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification button. Don't miss a moment of the action. Now, without further ado, let's rant. All right, so let's go ahead and start off with Roma's Rants. We break down the most controversial events in America with a spin. Tonight on Roma Rants, we're going to talk about the Minneapolis ICE shooting, killing of a mother of three, and a raw new video that's become the center of a nationwide storm. Now, here's the thing. There's been multiple videos about this that came out, right? And every single time, one side seems to lose a little bit of leverage.
It's not aging well for one particular narrative, is it?
It's really not. You know, and I don't even want to say this is a side anymore, because we don't even know who's on what side. Like, people have just they're crisscrossing, you know, grifting, doing all these random things. I think for the most part, the both of us have stayed the same in our, I wouldn't even say our politics, but at least in our morals.
Yeah, and maybe just our means of digesting the events as they unfold.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, it's so weird. We're going to talk a little bit about that in not just this first bit but in the second bit for our past, present, and future, because MAGA's been split. And every time another, and I'm not saying that we should be a monolith. I'm not saying anybody should be a 100% Trump. I'm not 100% Trump, you know, but there have just been some moments where I had to sit and go, MAGA what?
No, I could just see like the Tom and Jerry, where Jerry is like, no, but you're right, because like especially over the break and in December, I mean, a lot of things have come to light with a lot of different personalities, and you're starting to see that this is starting to play a factor in a lot of this.
Yeah, and Candace isn't able to soak up the spotlight anymore. Now we've got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, which on CNN and The View and out there, and it's like, I'm not saying she's wrong for being out there and the things she's saying, but it's just one of those, like, she's not, I don't know whether to call, I don't think she's a turncoat. I think maybe, you know, she's been dejected. She's been, you know, the way Trump has treated her, the way he's treating some other Republicans. And then those people are back and forth. There's a lot of weird happening where, unlike the left, that just seems to be like, you know what, we're cool with voting together even if we all disagree. The right is like not a monolith. It's kind of encouraging to some degree. It's like we're having these internal turmoils, but there are some things that are bringing us together, and there's some things that are weeding people out that are just not good for, you know, the overall direction that things are going. So so what do we got? What's on your docket for the first round?
All right, so let's go ahead and start with the political climate over this. You know, because we knew that as soon as this happened, it was going to be a shit show all across the board, right?
I'm not touching you. 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 And then bullets fly. Eventually.
Yeah, exactly. So it you know, the unfortunate part to this is that, you know, what drives people, right? What drives people to go out and think that they are the law, right? Because I'm not saying that what's her name? Renee Good, I think was her name.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that people drive themselves to a point now, because this, you can look at this over the last 20 years, right? The last 20 years, there's been some escalations, but never to this point where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to flat out do what I want and nobody can stop me, right? But it's clear that they can stop you. You know, and when you look at this situation, I had to look at the situation in my own lens, right? Not necessarily in the lens of what everybody else is seeing. So let's take it back, right? Let's imagine we take the officer out of this place, and then you put yourself in that place with your child. What response would you have then?
I mean, it's a matter of somebody's in a vehicle that can smash you and do can do serious bodily harm. I don't know of any state that has legitimate, decent self-defense law that doesn't govern this kind of a thing. I mean, vehicular assault. I've seen people catch vehicular assault charges on less. I'll just put it that way. You know, just average everyday citizens, but somehow, and I'm not saying that ICE shouldn't have and law enforcement shouldn't have a higher bar or standard, because they should.
And I want to get to that too,
but
because
you know, I can't say I would do anything different if two things were, you know, considering the two things, that officer had already had a previous incident where he was drugged 300 feet and ended up in the hospital, which I think is what Trump was conflating when he went out on a limb on his rant on. And
he was incorrect on that, by the way. He was incorrect.
He was incorrect.
I'm going to state that.
But, you know, if I had been in that officer's position, I can't say, honestly, as a gun carrying Second Amendment, you know, I got my Firearms Policy Coalition Boogaloo sticker on my koozie, you know, like I still don't know what I would have done in that position because I'm not in that position. And I think too many times people try try to make all these emotional arguments and say the what ifs. And it's like, what transpired. And then you have to look at everything that led up to it. And it's not just what happened in a vacuum, it's all of the pieces of the puzzle up to that moment that caused that perfect storm to go off like it did.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you were talking about the officer and about him having a very similar experience with this. Does PTSD have a play into his decision making? But then again, if that's the case, then what about every officer across America? Because there have been officers that have gone 20 years and never fired their weapon. And then there are officers that have fired their weapon multiple times, right? So do you put the onus on the officers that actually had to do their job in a strenuous moment? Or is there just not enough experience? Now, the thing is that what this also tells us is that there's not enough crime that happens now to where people don't understand how something like this can happen. So which means so technically we're safer, except for situations like this that could be completely avoidable. But go ahead.
Yeah, and then this is the POV from the officer who did the shot. Before we had some grainy videos early on of distant, and we didn't know what was really happening. Now we have the guy, and look, all right, let's pause. Just kind of hanging out. The early narrative was she was scared and trying to drive away. She doesn't look terrified one bit. I'm not mad at you. I'm not blah blah.
That's okay. We don't change our plates every morning, just so you know.
And they're giving him crap. That's the wife of the lady who was in the driver's seat. She's now got out of her car and is badgering these officers.
Fine. U.S. citizen.
And there's bystanders. And he walks back around. He's got a full view of it.
Going for his radio, like he's supposed to.
Here comes the other officer coming up saying, "Hey, out of the car."
Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the car.
Boom, right there. So, how much time did that take? But you can. I don't know if you're hearing the audio from that end, from me, but
get out of the fucking car.
It does. She's trying to get in, and she. Yep, and there's the shots. Now I don't think you guys can hear it from.
No, you can't hear them because they muted it, which is the right thing to do. Right. But here's the thing: she was willing to drive off, leaving her wife there.
See, that's the thing there that is weird. It's like, so if the narrative is she's just trying to escape, why is her wife standing outside the vehicle? If they're just trying to drop kids off and be about their business and turn around, well, where are you turning around on a one-way street? Look at the lines on the road. They're not yellow. That's white lines in the middle of the street. Like, there's so much of the left's narrative that just completely collapses the more you put it under scrutiny. It's like a sponge. It holds water until you squeeze it.
I don't even want to say the left's narrative, because we've seen some people on the right that also think that this is a cold-blooded murder, right? But there's one thing that we can put to rest now, is that it wasn't cold blood. Clearly an action happened and a reaction happened, right? Cold blood means he just got out of the car, walked up, and just started spraying.
Right.
Like this isn't like gang related, right? But for some reason, people in America now associate the police with like gangs, and they think that they operate like gangs just because they have, certain immunities and things like that. But what this does, that video right there proves that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and you can see in the other videos, I think Tim Pool put up, was watching the video and breaking it down the other night, and it was from the rear of the driver's side, showing her back up and then pull out, and you can see that front driver wheel. Now, it's a Honda Pilot, has I looked up the vehicle just to see, like, does this everything that I see check out with this car? front wheel drive, open differential, it's slick streets, and actually that's why the officers were stuck there in the first place. They got one of their ICE vehicles stuck in a snowbank.
Oh,
They were
geez.
trying to push it out, allegedly. At least that's what I had heard. So she's backing up and then into drive, puts the gas on it. You can see the front wheel spin, and an open differential, whichever wheel has the least amount of traction, gets the most power. You put more power on something that's got no traction, it's just going to keep spinning. But the traction control kicks in, and that's what gave that guy that window. Otherwise, he'd have probably been up under the bumper.
Yeah.
That's
No,
the only
I
thing that
agree.
saved him was the traction control, stopping that wheel from continuing to just peel out and then, run him over.
Yeah. And I think, and here's the thing. I honestly don't think that she was trying to run him over.
No.
I honestly think that she knew that if she were to pull off just a little bit and take off down the road, she would have got caught anyway because she left her wife behind. But that's beside the point. She thought that, oh, you know what? I'll just turn the wheel and just take off and everything's going to be good because they're federal law enforcement. Yeah, they got my license plate, but they'll come and find me later. But I think what happened was she hit that thing of ice and realized that instead of going to the right, she went straight.
Yeah, she hit the gas right at the same time as she started to turn, and so that wheel is pointed left still from her backing up that direction.
Exactly.
And so she's going forward around. She's got an officer at her window giving her lawful commands to get out of the vehicle, and so she's distracted. She's not seeing this officer circle her vehicle a second time.
Exactly.
So she's not necessarily at fault in the sense of premeditation. He's not at fault for premeditation. He's just not being seen, and he's in the wrong spot. I will say the one thing that I've seen is probably the best case of criticism for that officer was standing in front of that vehicle. Knowing that those people have been doing this kind of thing and like ramming other ICE vehicles or using their cars to impede their ability to move and do their job, that was probably one of the best arguments for that officer against that officer's conduct in the moment, which is being in the wrong place. I can't fault him for, reacting the way he did though, either. So it's a mess. That's the thing. It's tragic. It's a mess. We don't like to see that people are dead. Because it makes tensions rise for everybody. But I'm not gonna fault him for doing what he did. Now, knowing the backstory, and as we get more information on this lady, it seems like all these things about dropping her kids off. Well, she's had 2 kids taken from her custody. The one that's in her custody, she put into some kind of charter school that is a known leftist kind of hub, or like she's networked somehow. She trains with these people to do these kinds of interference with federal agents. They're activists. So she's intentionally there doing what she's doing, regardless of what anybody thinks. They're there to do a job. She's there to do some kind of direct action and impede upon that. And the leftist got a playbook for activism is to do things in a way that where it's not parking the car isn't the thing. That and impeding their ability to arrest people isn't actually what they're after. What they're after is what happened. Because they call you a reactionary, not because you are one, but because they're looking for a reaction from you so they can politicize it and use it as furtherance in their propaganda machine. That's the leftist playbook. That's what this is.
And it's crazy how a reaction is the one that gets it. It's the same thing when people talk about self-defense in your own home, where it's like, oh, you shouldn't own guns. It's like, oh, so I'm not supposed to react if somebody breaks into my own home. Like, how? Like, where is the logic in that? There is no logic, right? And the thing is that a majority of middle America is starting to figure that out. And now this is why this isn't as big as people think it is. But what's happening here is that the loudest voices are on the outsides right now.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out this and bring up Hardy's point here. You know, getting hit by a car 6 months ago has me thinking you might be looking for some get back. Why would you put yourself in front of a car again? Experience would say don't, right? I guess that's kind of, I'm kind of 50-50 on that. Like, experience should tell him watch where you're standing, but reading into it and saying he might be looking to get some get back, I can't say that. Now, I'll bring up Hardy's second point here was, from what I've seen, cops use overwhelming presence and force whenever they get the chance. Now we're getting into where our audience kind of rides that middle ground of, we've seen the feds do ridiculous stuff. We've been through January 6th. We've been through Patriot Front. We've been through Blood Tribe. We've seen all of these Fed boys, but where are they now? We were talking about this in the Discord the other day. These are the kind of conversations that we get in the weeds on. Why haven't you seen these pop-up protest, radical right wing? This is one of those weird dichotomies we have to deal with. Like, we went from one narrative saying Fed's bad, get the glowies out of our realm and arrest all the corrupt deep state people. But since Trump has started using overwhelming presence and force, like to do these ICE actions and these federal enforcements, where are those guys?
Exactly.
I don't know. I can't say that for sure they're out here on the streets of Minnesota doing these things under lawful orders that I know of, but I would rather them be doing these than being controlled by deep state guys doing propaganda stuff like Patriot Front or infiltrating Proud Boys and all of that. So we have problems. We have real issues that we don't have answers for. And so we have to be honest about that moving forward through a lot of this, because we got actors that are playing both sides right now. That's just a reality.
It is, and it's the same thing with like Maduro, when everybody's like, oh, well, you shouldn't be able to take out a standing leader of a country, but yet every single person in the last 10 years, every single president was like, we need to do something about it. Or I'm going to put a $25 million bounty on. Trump didn't say that. He didn't. So it begs the question, like, where exactly does your political ideology lie?
Yeah.
And that doesn't go for just the left. That goes for the right too. There's a lot of people on the right now that are doing some real massive grifting scales that I didn't think were going to happen, but it did.
I called it though. I called it early on, and the words I used for it was weaponized confirmation bias. We are seeing it, but I think it's good that we have. Well, I'll put it this way: what happened to all the thin blue liners that are in MAGA right now after Portland, where the police came out and did some goose stepping right over top of the patriots that were there to support them? That's why you got guys like Hardy in the chat here with real criticism of police that are conservatives. It's not that we don't want policing. It's not that we don't want those things. It's that they have to be doing it the right way. And so this is why we have MAGA people flipping out over this ICE shooting. That's why we have this. Like, some of them have been on the edge waiting for something to break it and allow them to vent that frustration with policing. And some of them are joining the left narratively in some way. I'm not saying Hardy is, but he is some of his criticism I think is apt and is on point. So do it the right way. Yep, he's confirmed it with me. Yep, do it the right way. So.
Exactly. All right, so let's see what JD Vance has to say about this.
The precedent here is very simple. You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action. That's a federal issue. That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job. The idea that Tim Walz and a bunch of radicals in Minneapolis are going to go after and make this guy's life miserable because he was doing the job that he was asked to do is preposterous. The unprecedented thing is the idea that a local official can actually prosecute a federal official with absolute immunity. I've never seen anything like that. It would get tossed out by a judge. So what I'd like Minnesota to focus on is the real issue, that they're encouraging people. Minneapolis officials are encouraging people to commit violence against ICE officials.
Right. And there's a clear distinction here. I mean, we have laws in place. The Supremacy Act. Like they have the right to be anywhere they want to be. I'm not saying that they can do whatever they want, but they have a right to be there. All right, because their jurisdiction is not just DC. Their jurisdiction is to protect the entire United States. And it is much harder to protect the United States as a whole than it is a jurisdiction in a small local city like Minneapolis.
Right. And that's why we have distributed federal assets that are under the, the custody and control of governors. They have the National Guard. They have field offices. We're supposed to be able to, we have this federated group of states, this union. The states are it's one of those things where we expect the local governments to do their job. When they don't do their job, they don't prosecute federal crime. That's why you can catch felonies and never be prosecuted by the feds, So because you're breaking federal law, or it raises to that level where it's like we have agreed as a society in this nation that there are certain things that violate all of our sensibilities and understanding of what is right in this country. So, but Walz is refusing. So when you get to the point where states are refusing to enforce law, then we start getting dicey. And then you got Walz out here threatening to use the National Guard against the federal government when it's like, bro, they are the federal government. Like, yeah,
but the thing is, I think they threatened this, but I don't think they had the balls to do it.
They don't.
I don't think they had the balls to do it because.
Go ahead. I think we're about to say the same thing.
Yeah. Because I think Walz knows that it. I will say this. He's out. All right. He's not running back for re-election. So there is a possibility. There's a small possibility that he might do something stupid. But what you also have to understand is that the one governor that decides that he's going to do something about it, whatever actions that happen out of that is going to set the precedent for the rest of the country.
And that precedent will be El Presidente taking his toys back and saying, they're federalized now, baby, because no state, there's only 2 states in this nation that can do something like what Tim Walz is threatening that I know of. I think it's Texas and California.
Yep.
Because they have state guards on top of the National Guards.
And they're the 2 biggest states in the union.
Right. So what will happen is Trump will just Title 10. His Title 10 powers are federalizing National Guard and the Insurrection Act. Probably in that order, he would take back. It would just be like, you can't use my own troops against me, fool. Stop it. Like, that's exactly what will happen.
Right. And even if they did, like, that is, I was going to say espionage. That's not the word. It's treason.
It's unlawful for him.
It's unlawful. Exactly. Because he can grab their troops whenever he wants. All he has to do is sign a piece of paper and be like, they're mine.
So I think Trump is just going to let him gum flap, because they got him on other stuff with all of the corruption and the indictments with all the fraud and the Somali stuff.
Yep.
And Tim Walz is washed up. He's washed out. They've got him more ways than he can count. So I ain't worried about that. But yeah, but it still doesn't. Oh yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Show this. What?
I understand that Vice President Vance believes that shooting a young mother of 3 in the face 3 times is an acceptable America that he wants to live in, and I do not. And that is a fundamental difference between Vice President Vance and I. I do not believe that the American people should be assassinated in the street. Thank you.
Okay, so that's lip service. That is complete lip service. The thing is, you trade places, AOC. You trade places with that officer, and then come back and talk to us.
Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to move your car, please.
I don't think she knows anybody in her family. Maybe she does. That's law enforcement.
She's a New York bartender.
That all of a sudden has like $10 million.
Like her experience with police, probably in that capacity, is throwing drunk people out of the bar.
Yeah, to help her. To help
her.
Like, to help her, because she's like 120 pounds after Thanksgiving.
Right.
Right. So you're not going to be able to do that. I mean, it's clear here that this is lip service, right? And I'm not saying it's just her. Like, I am more about being critical about Congress than I am about the President of the United States, because the President of the United States has to make impossible decisions every day that they're in office. Sometimes you have to make great decisions. Sometimes you have to make bad decisions. And sometimes you have to make a decision that's either the bad decision or the worst decision. There is no good decision. Right? So there's only so much that you can do there. Yeah. But in Congress, you got 535 members where you can make codified decisions amongst a group of people that are represented by everybody here in America. Right? So to come out and say something like this, knowing that it's just lip service just to get reelected, knowing that she's in a place where she knows she's going to get reelected for whatever reason. I'm not saying, immigration, all this other stuff. No, let's take that off the table. She knows she's going to get reelected. She knows she's going to be a presidential candidate within the next 8 years. She's
playing the game.
She's playing the long game.
Handing the line out.
Yep. Exactly. All right. So we talked about the political climate. Now let's talk about the law enforcement climate. All right. So this is from Donald Trump Jr. And he states, hold on, give me a second. Let me pull it up here. He states, the media owes J.D. Vance and all of America a big apology. The Minneapolis ICE shooting was literally Covington 2026. The video clearly shows that the ICE officer getting hit by the car, and she comes right at him. It doesn't get any more conclusive than that. All right. So we already saw this, right? We already saw the fact that he was hit. That sound is not him hitting the ground. That sound is him getting hit by a car. All right. So that's understandable. Now, I want to go to this next one, which is, you guessed it, Minnesota's very own Jesse the Body Ventura.
Oh, no.
Something? I'll give you a quote. We're a third world country now. You want to know why? I'm an expert. I've been to them. I spent 17 months in Southeast Asia while the draft dodger was playing golf, right? You know how I know we're a third world country? Because in third world countries, They have the military doing their police work in the cities when you walk around. I was in the Philippines the day.
He's not wrong about that. But you see where this is going.
Yeah.
Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and went under dictatorship. We went from nobody to a guy with a machine gun on every corner. That's what happens in a dictatorship. In comes the military. That's what's happening here.
He was the governor of Minnesota.
He was.
He was also one of the coolest wrestlers there was, Jesse the Body. And he had a really cool show where he went and did, conspiracy theory stuff as well, and say what you would about some of his, lighter, more fluffy days. The guy is literally, he's a SEAL. He was a Navy SEAL. He knows what he's talking about. Imagine he runs. Imagine he just says, you know what, I'm running for governor again, or he steps in and asks Trump, look, I'll run this thing. If you come in here at Insurrection Act this city, I'll run it. Hey-oh, T-Bone.
T-Bone.
Bro, if Jesse the Body Ventura in his shaky old man state still could run Minnesota better than the draft dodger Tim Walz ever could.
The draft dodger.
That's what he called him. I mean, I don't think it's a totally accurate, but
wait a minute. He's not talking about him. He's talking about Trump.
Is he talking about Trump?
No. Think of it in the inverse. That's why he's talking. Yeah, that's why he's talking about Southeast Asia.
Trump was old enough to go
Mm-hmm.
overseas. Wow. I didn't catch that.
I'm glad I recorrected you on that one, because this would have gone in a way different.
I knew there was something with Walz and his military service, and guys give him crap all the time.
But he's also the same person that was like, we talk about minimum wage, but we need to talk about having a maximum wage. Like, this guy is...
He's been all over the place.
He is made for TV. I love it. I absolutely love it.
But give a guy credit where it's due. He's not wrong.
No, he's definitely not wrong. And the thing is, though, is that Southeast Asia is not the United States. All right. The president of the United States has sole power over one branch. And it's part of the reason why he only has 8 years. Right. He or she, if that ever happens. That's the only that's the reason why they are limited in the amount of time that they can serve there. All right. In Congress, you can be voted in as many times as you want, but you have to be voted in.
Right.
In the judicial branch, you have to be elected by the officials you have to be not elected. You have to be
appointed
and
confirmed
by one branch and then confirmed by another, but you get a life term.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the way that's set up is perfect.
It's better than anything else that's been concocted in
anywhere
the history
in the
of
world.
mankind. It extends the life of our government because it's tied up in its own bureaucracy and power struggles and, the principles that guide each one of them. And over time, a lot of it's eroded, but still better than anywhere else.
200 years later, it's still better than anywhere else. And quite frankly, there are some from 200 years ago that I would not want right now. No, some things have to change. Technology changes. The age of information changes. Mm-hmm. You have to change with the times, but they make that process extremely difficult, and they do it on purpose. They do that so that you can't just overrun a government overnight, just like what we're going to talk about here in a second. with past, present, and future regime change. Haha, you like that, didn't you? You like that change.
Good.
Yes,
You get on with
absolutely.
it.
All right. So before we get into today's chaos, we have to rewind. All right. Because none of this, not Venezuela, not the cartels, not terrorism labels, none of that stuff makes sense unless you understand how the U.S. learned to mix foreign policy, regime change, and national security. I know you guys have heard that because that's how they get themselves out of a lot of BS.
The national security threat.
Yeah. Most of the time, it's for the common good. Sometimes they use it to protect themselves.
Or corporations.
Or corporations. Right.
Let's be honest. It happens.
Yes. No. But it doesn't just start with cartels and drugs and guns and war and terrorism and things like that. It starts with an ideology, right? But the one thing that we do have to talk about is where it all started, which was right after World War II, after we got rid of Adolf Hitler, and there's all these communist regimes that were around, right? And they had this anti-communist sentiment because they saw a lot of commonalities between Adolf Hitler and communism.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Stalin.
And especially Stalin, right?
And the commies, it's not like World War II ended and then we got commies. Commies started in the early 1900s, and then as Hitler rose to power, there was a pretty good sized exodus of communists and Marxists out of Europe into South America.
Mm-hmm. Which is the whole reason why they had this whole thing about Adolf Hitler's still alive and he's in South America.
Argentina.
They have a German like area in Argentina, specifically for Germans that have fled.
Have you seen the videos that are interviews with locals who talk about like when they were little kids, there was a chateau that they weren't allowed to go to, and there was like a specifically like forbidden place to go, but only a couple people were actually allowed to go there to deliver like stuff like food and supplies and things. And there's allegedly one account of somebody describing a man that vaguely fits or the description of what Adolf Hitler would have been like at those days with the limp and all the different like the way that he presented himself. Yeah. So
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Now, obviously they're not communists, but there was still a contingency of Nazis that were abroad, and Argentina was a place where a lot of them went, and they think that Hitler went there. But when I talk about Argentina, we're talk about like Guatemala and Chile, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, and Iran.
Ooh, things are going to get spicy tonight. Yeah, so like, the idea goes all the way back to the Monroe Doctrine, right? 19th century policy that was like, Europe stays out, the U.S. runs the neighborhood.
Well, even before that, you've got the Truman Doctrine about containment of communism. And so out of that, the Monroe Doctrine came like, you guys stay in Europe and Asia. We're the Americas, which has gone to the wayside in modern days. But yeah.
So essentially like a warning into a justification, so to speak.
Pretty much.
That's what I figured. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is, the Cold War, right? And how that made an effect in Latin America, South America, those strategies there, right? And the first question obviously is, are you communist or can they become communist? Right? Like,
It was like, is there a slippery slope here?
just a little
Maybe.
bit. You know, because there was a lot more communist countries back then than there are now. But they also didn't know, we didn't have the numbers that we have now about the successes of communist nations back then that we do now. Right. You know, so if the answer was, let's say it's in between, right? Let's say if the answer was like maybe, you know, Washington, D.C. wasn't asking, is this government democratic, right? You know, the question was, are they communist or could they become communists?
The McCarthy era.
Exactly. And that's how we ended up with
Kind of.
intervention.
That happens later, but it starts before him.
Right. And that's why intervention became a thing, you know, because it's like, okay, we're going to put people on the ground now to see what's going on here. And you didn't want to mess with the U.S. because they had just dropped 2 suns on Japan and nobody wanted that smoke. Right? So
not even we wanted that smoke after we did it. We were like, ooh, that was
we didn't want that smoke before we did it. Right?
Nope.
Like, so again, this isn't about drugs. It's not about, you know, human rights, which people talk about now, but because ideology became an actual national security threat.
But was it wrong? Were they wrong in that?
Not back then, they weren't.
They really weren't. I don't even think today we would be wrong in trying to contain communism. But that's spicy because then you have to do things about it. But, you know, I think it started off with like, oh, these guys are literally starving their own people and put them in gulags in Siberia and all this stuff and all the things of communism where, oh, we had to join forces to fight the Nazis. And then it's like, well, I think it was, wasn't it Patton wanted to just continue in and just all the way to Moscow. And then they were like, no, you're not doing that. And then we ended up where we're at. So anyway, but yeah, the national security threat, I don't think they were too far off, but the way they went about it, they didn't, it's like that Jurassic Park thing. It's like their scientists were so enamored with that they could, that they didn't stop to ask if they should.
If they should.
And so
condors on the verge of extinction. No, I had to jump that in there. No, but I get it. But South America was not the only place. All right. You had Iran, you had Iran-Contra, cocaine war, you know, that's where it gets a little complicated, right? Because ideology, secrecy, drugs collide, you know, and this is like in the 80s, right? You know, covert operations are happening where they sold arms to Iran and then illegally routed money to ammunition or to anti-communist fighters. Nicaragua, they bypassed Congress entirely. Mm-hmm. You know, kind of like where Venezuela is now with the BRICS nations. It's kind of the same thing.
You know, kind of like we weren't supposed to be in certain countries during the Vietnam conflict, and yet we were anyway. You know, so there was some of that. But that early on, the first of them, and I didn't know this till we started researching it. The first regime that we changed in that era was Iran in 1953.
Yes.
Well, I'm not talking about the revolution in the 1970s. We're talking about a direct coup of the democratically elected prime minister of Iran in 1953 because they nationalized their oil. Sound familiar?
Absolutely.
53. We're not that far off of World War II, and we're like, oh, Iran, we're going to depose and put the Shahs in. Like today, we think of the current dictatorship that's there with the radical Islam as being illegitimate. How legitimate was the Shah? Like that gets dicey to talk about. So we don't normally think about how deep the deep state goes back in those days dealing with regime change.
Yeah, well, not just that, but it was much harder to dictate what they were doing. versus now where there's cameras everywhere, right? So in order to understand that, we have to understand where it all started, which is right after World War II, which is the Truman Doctrine, right? Right. So on March 12th, 1947, President Harry S. Truman presented this address before the joint session of Congress. His message, known as the Truman Doctrine, asked Congress for $400 million in military and economic assistance for Turkey and Greece. On Friday, February 21st, 1947, the British Embassy informed the U.S. State Department that officials of the Great Britain could no longer provide financial aid to the governments of Greece and Turkey, which is sort of like a prerequisite to what they have right now. But anyways, I digress. American policymakers have been monitoring Greece's crumbling economy, which they did crumble, about 15 years ago?
Greece has been on borrowed monies for a long time.
For a long time. This was almost 100 years ago.
If there's ever a country that's king of restructuring their economic system and getting over leverage and saying, trust me, bro, like, it's Greece. They have no idea how to use cash. Not one bit.
Exactly. American policymakers have been monitoring Greece's crumbling economy and political conditions, especially the rise of the communist-led insurgency known as the National Liberation Front, or the EAM or ELAS. The United States had also been following events in Turkey, where a weakened government faced Soviet pressure to share control of the strategic Donal Straits, where Britain announced they would withdraw aid to Greece and Turkey, and responsibilities passed on to the United States. Now, we're talking about the Straits. What exactly is Ukraine and Russia fighting over right now?
Warm water ports.
Exactly. So, history repeats itself, ladies and gentlemen. In a meeting between congressmen and State Department officials, Undersecretary of the State, Dean Acheson, articulated what would later become known as the domino theory. He stated that more was at stake than Greece and Turkey. If for those two key states should fall, communism would likely spread to South Iran and as far as East India. Acheson concluded that not since the days of Rome and Carthage such a polarization of power existed. The stunned legislators agreed to endorse the program on a condition that the President Truman stressed the severity of the crisis and addressed to Congress in a radio broadcast to the American people. Where is this now? Where is this now where they actually address the nation on things and money that we are sending money to that we know we're not going to get back?
They've decided that the best policy now is just to ignore it. If it fails, wipe it under the rug. Basically what they do, and they give some late night Friday, thing about it, or we don't figure out what they're actually going to do about it till they've done something even dumber down the road, where we got to paper over this, or we've got to, topple this government or do this. They just kind of let this stuff drift off into the ether.
Mm-hmm.
There's no accountability, is what I'm trying to say. There's no accountability for failures. And we're about to talk about a lot of failures.
Yep, we are. But in order to do that, so we talked about the Truman Doctrine, and now we're going to go into what you were talking about, which was the Iran regime change and the long-term blowback. All right, and who better to talk about this than Joe Rogan?
Wow.
Let's go.
That was at the fall, I guess it was in the 70s when, so this is the story for people that don't know about Iran. So there was a gentleman who was democratically elected. So he decided that he was going to nationalize oil in Iran, and they got him out like that. They installed the Shah and turned it into the CIA and the British government, and everybody conspired to get rid of this democratically elected guy, because Iran at the time was women were wearing skirts rather, walking down the street. Mohammad Mossadegh. It says Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh was removed from power in a coup organized and financed by British and U.S. governments. The Shah quickly returned to take power and signed off over 40% of Iran's oil fields to U.S. companies. It's crazy.
It's the playbook.
So if you wonder why people are talking about, oh, Venezuela, 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 because we didn't just like follow the book, we created the book.
Yeah. Well, think of it this way: everything that's happening now, like they want to paint the United States as just solely being after riches and oil for just to line their own pockets. That's a byproduct of having identified a foreign enemy, an ideological enemy.
Mhm.
And so, how do you fight wars? You have to put gas in the tanks and grease the rails. There's the only way you do war. Everything is built on petroleum product. Like the petroleum product is like the baseline substance that you need to do everything. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying I understand the playbook of going, wow. And like we mentioned earlier in the Truman Doctrine about their worries about communism going down into Iran and all of that, and then wanting to have control and power. And you have a nation that goes, oh, this is our oil. And we go, oh, I think not, because there was worries of communism and being able to, unseat that. Well, we'll talk about this again, but we know what happens later with a color revolution.
Yes,
it inevitably happened anyway.
And to think about it, then when you think about foreign influence into United States politics when it comes to climate change, talking about fossil fuels and why we shouldn't be using fossil fuels, things like that, that becomes more prominent later. But I'm pretty sure that's going to be in the third episode.
Because guess who's still using a lot of fossil fuels is communist countries that don't care about our.
But that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
Why is it?
Yeah, two sides of that same coin.
Exactly. Why are they coming over here and telling us not to? Right. It's because they want to be able to have their cake and eat it too. But again, that's going to be on the later episode when we talk about that stuff.
So what happens the year after they depose the Iranian prime minister in Guatemala? We're still in the 50s, people.
Yes, we are. So let me see. What do I got here? History season. Boom. There it is. So let's go ahead and pull that up.
The issue was that much of this land was owned by the influential American corporation, the United Fruit Company. The company then launched a public relations campaign in the US, which falsely depicted the Guatemalan president as a close friend of the Soviet Union. But US President Dwight D. Eisenhower was convinced, so he tasked the CIA with toppling the Guatemalan government. The CIA organized a small force of rebels, and thanks to American support, they were eventually able to march on the capital and take power. The new regime began a brutal crackdown on suspected communists and quickly restored the United Fruit Company's confiscated lands.
Under the guise of communism, under the guise of national security, under the guise of, you see what's going on here?
You missed one. U.S. company who had assets in the country.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, sorry, you're not stealing that. That's just like Venezuela. That's the same playbook with Venezuela. You got, U.S. oil companies invested in, like, now it's the value of $17 trillion worth of oil infrastructure. And Maduro was just like, it's mine now. So Guatemala, we were like, sorry. And I think one of our guys in the Discord that knows a lot of this history really detailed was talking about how it was the only reason that this happened was because the guy that owned that company had buddies in the intel community, and so they did it as like, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of thing, and got it up to Eisenhower and then down. So like, it was literally the company, the that owned the banana farms that went in and said, "Hey, bub, can you use the federal government to get my stuff back?" It's crappy and it's shady, but that's what happened. And what eventually happens later anyway? it ends up in the hands of communists or cartels.
You can't make this up.
It either
You
goes
literally
right back to being owned by communists or cartels roll in and they stab us in the back. Just like in the Middle East, where we topple one regime or another and you end up with some kind of communist
Taliban
thing
to
coming
ISIS, and, yeah.
Mujahideen, all of that. Same stuff. And then after Guatemala, what was it? Chile in the 70s. So we get a little break through the 60s because through the 60s we're in Vietnam, right? We're dealing with all that stuff and attempting all those failed regime changes. But let's keep talking about South America.
There we go.
In the 1960s, Chile was a democratic nation despite many of their neighbors being under dictatorships in the mid-20th century. But the Americans became heavily involved in politics in Latin America since the Cuban Revolution, and through projects like the Alliance for Progress, millions of dollars were sent out to their allies, like Betancourt in Venezuela. Plus, the CIA also helped start coups in countries like Bolivia and Brazil. And in Chile, in 1964, they sent money to help Montalva win an election against Salvador Allende, a socialist. However, in Chile, no presidents can serve 2 terms, so in 1970, Montalva was forced to step down. His party, the Christian Democratic Party, was taken over by Radomiro Tomic. He, however, came in third during the election, losing to former presidents Jorge Alessandri and Salvador Allende. But no candidate won an outright majority, so the National Congress had to pick a leader. The CIA tried to get the National Congress to select Jorge Alessandri, only to have him later resign and bring Montalva into power once again. But the National Congress chose Allende, and he began to implement many socialist reforms. These helped bolster his popularity, but the Americans withdrew aid to Chile, and the country suffered through mass inflation. Plus, his close connections with socialist leaders like Castro worried many on the right. So in Parliament, they united to form the Confederation of Democracy and stopped further reforms. And the CIA helped fund opposition to Allende, like the El Mercurio newspaper, which called for him to be overthrown. He also had very little support from the largely right-wing military officers, who lived in a relatively closed-off community. But these officers still had a great deal of political influence. For instance, in 1969, soldiers rose up to demand higher wages as part of the Tecnazo insurrection. However, the new army commander-in-chief, René Schneider, promised to keep the military out of politics when Allende was elected. This angered those that believed Allende was poised to install a communist dictatorship, so Schneider was assassinated just a year later. His replacement, Carlos Prats, maintained this policy, but still paramilitary groups like Fatherland and Liberty were formed. And after a couple years of rising tensions, Colonel Super took his tank regiment to the presidential palace in June 1973. Although this coup failed, it became apparent that without the support of the military and national police, Allende could not restore order, and the poor economy led to strikes breaking out around the country. The wives of military officers protested outside Pratt's house and he was forced to resign, and was replaced by Augustus Pinochet. Then the members of the Confederacy of Democracy voted to ask if ministers and military could put an end to Allende's alleged unconstitutional practices. Allende responded by saying that he had acted constitutionally, said the vote was sowing disorder, and in early September promised to hold a referendum on his policies. Fearing that the country would become even more left-wing, the head of the Navy, Jose Toribio Merino, got support from the newly appointed heads of the Air Force, Gustavo Lee, and Police Force, Cesar Mendoza. And then, with Augustus Pinochet, they launched a coup early in the morning of September 11th. Commandos blockaded the port of Valparaiso while the Army and Air Force took out radio and TV stations. Allende retreated to the presidential palace with members of the military that remained loyal, but now he had very little communication with the rest of the country. By 9 AM, the military declared that they had taken over most of the country and called for Allende to resign. He, however, refused to resign and also refused offers to escape the capital to lead a counter-coup later on. Instead, he waited within the presidential palace as fighting in the capital continued for a few hours, and the palace was bombed. It is believed he committed suicide within the palace just before it was captured by the military. With Allende gone, Pinochet, Merino, Mendoza, and Lee initially shared power as part of a military government, and suspended the constitution in Congress and banned opposing political parties. Pinochet, as head of the army, was made head of this junta, and eventually consolidated power and made himself president. And he would go on to arrest tens of thousands of political enemies, many of which were infamously held in the National Stadium, and killed many political opponents. The American role in the coup is disputed, but it is said that they helped fan the flames beforehand and helped justify the coup by spreading the idea that Allende was planning a Marxist self-coup as part of Plan Zeta.
Wow.
It's a that's how Pinochet came to power, and eventually became known for giving helicopter rides to communists.
Sound familiar?
It was a military coup, but you see that if the political leadership does not have the backing of the military, of the policing portion of the government, it's a fail. It's going to eventually, because ultimately whoever has the ability to exert force in more than the other side is going to win.
And whoever does it the fastest, right? Because it can't be over a long period of time. It has to be over a short period of time.
Right. And that was, I think, what ended up problem with Chile ended up being, the fighting just continued on. And you have Pinochet just consolidating more and more and more and more power to himself over the years, and it just got bloodier and worse. Kind of like the French Revolution. It didn't get any better, and then it didn't finally cool off until after Napoleon.
Yeah, pretty much.
It took that long for France to kind of settle down.
Yeah, because there was a period in time where there were executions every single day.
Oh, the terrors were bad.
For years that happened. And that's definitely not something that's going to happen in a civilized society, so to speak. But
right.
But that brings us into what's visible to the public, right? Like the Shah falls, and then we're talking about Iran in 1979.
Yeah, this is where that comes back home to roost.
Yep.
Right after Pinochet comes to power.
Exactly.
Years.
You know what? Let's let them tell you.
In its place arose an Islamic Republic. A repressive theocracy had replaced an authoritarian monarchy. And almost overnight, Iran had been transformed from a crucial U.S. ally into a bitter opponent. Here are some of the key dates that led to the revolution. From 1941 to 1979, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, a close partner of the United States, had ruled Iran. He modernized Iran while forcefully suppressing dissent and political freedoms. The clergy opposed the Shah's social and economic reforms. Discontent grew until in 1978, anti-Shah demonstration spread across the mostly Shia country. Strikes and mass protests erupted, and accusation flew that the Shah was the U.S. puppet. Martial law was imposed. Cassette tapes of speeches by the 76-year-old Khomeini were smuggled into the country, fueling the unrest. Many Iranians took to the rooftops at night to shout Allahu Akbar, or God is great, to express their protest. On January 16, 1979, the Shah left Iran for what was officially a vacation. Many Iranians rejoiced with chants of "The Shah is gone." The man who'd ruled the country for 37 years would never return from exile, dying some 13 months later. On February 1st, a crowd of around 3 million people in Tehran welcomed Khomeini's return from 14 years of exile. Asked about his feelings, the Islamic revivalist famously gave a cryptic one-word answer: nothing. Finally, on February 11th, the revolutionaries declared victory after Iran's demoralized armed forces declared neutrality. The monarchy was suddenly gone. Deadly factionalism followed, but Khomeini held the upper hand. And in April, following a nationwide referendum, an Islamic Republic was officially proclaimed, eventually with Khomeini at its apex.
The Ayatollah.
Thousands of Shah-era officials and other Iranians would be executed following summary trials. Student revolutionaries would storm the U.S. embassy, taking dozens hostage. Tehran would doggedly pursue anti-Western policies for decades to come. The revolution's 40th anniversary arrives at a critical juncture for the Islamic Republic, hobbled by U.S. sanctions, infighting, and the frustration of a restless young populace, most of whom were born after the revolution. Some regime insiders have warned recently that the Islamic establishment could collapse. Even one of Khomeini's own grandsons warned there's no guarantee that this system his grandfather created would survive. Despite such speculation, it is clear that the clerical establishment remains firmly in place.
And from there, we know pretty much the rest of the Iranian story. You know, lots of turmoil and Islamofascism, Islamic terrorism. That's kind of the pattern of the Middle East. Is we'll topple legitimate governments, even if they're trashy kind of dictators. Most of the guys that we've deposed were at least keeping their boot on the neck of the extremists. You know, and we started. Even the Shah was that way. We put him in, and he was in all the repression and all the heavy-handedness was to keep a lot of that stuff down. And really, it all started off trying to fight communism.
Yeah,
we were trying to fight communism. There was a legitimate government in there, and instead of like working with that government, saying, "Look, guys, everywhere that communism goes, it destroys everything it touches," and trying to build legitimate relations. We just go in and say, it's ours. We're going to put our own guys in. And then nobody likes that. And eventually it rolls up into some kind of a revolution. And if it's in the Middle East or somewhere where there's heavy Shia or Islamic, population, they just come in with their own government. They come in with Sharia law. Now what you got? The place is worse off than we found it. Like 20, 30 years before. It's just
right.
that's why I think that's one of the big differences between why we're more comfortable with dealing with South America versus the Middle East right now, is because we have there's so much that we've seen in the Middle East, just one after the next that falls. Even though we're not talking about all of those, whether it was like Egypt or Libya or Afghanistan or Iraq. That's pretty much Syria, all these places over there we've had our hands in and meddled in. Is basically follows a lot of the same playbook.
But you also have to think about the whole oil aspect, right? You know, where
it's a real thing.
Well, we bring our people in, and then of course not everybody in the American government understands how oil works, right? Like President Trump doesn't know how to drill oil out of the ground.
No, but that's why they partner with companies.
Exactly. Right.
Do it.
So they give them, certain immunities and things like that, and say, and in return, your job is to do X, Y, and Z for us. And it's that what would you call it? It's the deals that they make, but it's deals that they make over here and then bring it over there where they have no say. They have absolutely no say in how that goes, right? And so if you wonder why people are talking about Venezuela now, is because of the history of the United States and how they operate. And it's not like they're hiding it now. They're not. They're literally they took 5 boats this week? 5 oil tankers?
That's the ones that are not including the ones we had already confiscated.
Mm-hmm. The ones that we know about.
Right. I mean, they were Venezuelan ships that were repainting themselves in transit to look like Russian vessels. And then our guys are tailing them. And there was a Russian sub that was escorting it, and we just flew helicopters and a couple of Coast Guard cutters in and said, "This our boat, boys. Back up." And the Ruskies got out of there. They said, "Fine, have it. It's whatever." And so,
and this was after they got Maduro. Because this
Maduro
happened before they got Maduro. It might have been a problem,
right? Yeah.
After they got Maduro, it was like, "Hey, did you see what happened to your best friend?" That's probably
right. China and Russia had security agreements with the Venezuelans, and they didn't have cheap hardware. They had state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line Russian anti-air defense, all the things, and we walked it. We just said, what None of that matters. We just took out all their toys. We got Maduro, all that. We know that news. What's interesting about our timeline and how we're going here, we just talked about the chickens coming home to roost with Iran. That same year, we get into a proxy war with Russia in Afghanistan, which brings us into the next segment here.
How did the mighty Soviet Union lose a war to Afghanistan? In the red corner, one of the world's Cold War superpowers. In the blue corner, an undeveloped Central Asian nation. Seemed like an easy win for the Soviets as they invaded in 1979. But this seemingly easy victory would turn into a 10-year conflict that would cost the Soviets countless lives, leave untold more soldiers horribly wounded, and result in the Soviets withdrawing from the region with nothing to show for it. What was the secret to the Afghani success? For one thing, the Soviets were fighting on their turf. The Afghans knew the country and were able to pull off effective sneak attacks. The other factor was no conflict is neutral in the Cold War. The US was training the Mujahideen, the primary opposition to the Soviets. They were also responsible for many of the weapons they received. The Soviets had the superior army and firepower, but their armed forces were low on morale, and as the bodies piled up, the Soviets had no desire to keep fighting without a clear victory in sight. The Afghans never scored a decisive win, they just wore the Soviets down, a feat Ukraine is no doubt hoping to repeat.
It was literally the Soviet Vietnam. What we went through in Vietnam, we turned that experience on the Russians in Afghanistan.
It was crazy. And there were movies about that in the 70s.
And what do we know about that? What was Afghanistan that we ended up having to go back over there for after 9/11? We went in and we went after Osama bin Laden, and then there was regime change in Iraq and all of those things. More of those forever wars in the sand that have left a really bad taste in the mouths of many of our armed services guys and the rest of us who were peers to them, So
especially now when you know what it was really about. And like in the 80s and 90s, we can even go back to Vietnam. Right. People knew about Vietnam, but it wasn't like there was critical evidence that you could use against it. Whereas in 2001, they didn't have the internet back then. Now we have the internet, and now we can put pieces together. Right. It's not one person coming in and saying, "Hey, by the way, my name is Michael Moore, and here's my story." There's multiple people that have a piece of the puzzle, and they meet and they somehow find each other, put those pieces together, and it gets to a point where you can't refute it. Right. There's only so much that you can hide. There's only so much that you can say did or didn't happen. And then that goes back to what happened in Minneapolis. Right. And I'm bringing this full circle. This is what I'm good at. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I might not be good at all history, but at least I can piece things together.
Pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition is my number one key thing that I am absolutely good at. Right. And when you look at what happened in Minneapolis, there's a pattern that's going on here in that area. And it's the fact that they allow a lot of lawlessness and things to happen to where somebody gets hurt or killed, and then they turn around and use that as fodder.
That was the playbook during Vietnam. The communists that were in our own country that had ideologically turned our own citizens against us. The way they treated our troops when they came home. The demoralization. It's been decades of this. While our government's out there failing to fight communism on those external fronts, which in some ways we should be in a way, because you need resources to fight some of these superpowers. If you have to have a fight with them, it's a game of risk, right? You want to take the resources, as many resources on the board as you can reasonably defend. But what we ignored the entire time, as we're finding out, is what's the culture like underneath with all the people that live in these places when you move in and you depose their leaders, or you fund one side or the other, and then the fallout happens within a couple of decades?
It's like the show Survivor. You know, they throw people in survival situations in places that people already live. You know?
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Right. But anyways, so to close this out, in retrospect, let's go into now 9/11, right? You know, after 9/11, the U.S. returns to that intervention logic, because there was a period of time during, I hate to say this, but during the Clinton administration where everybody was doing well, right? There wasn't wars, there wasn't any, there was no threats.
Right, but kind of leading to that, we go through like the war on drugs. All of that failed policy we talked about in South America ends up on our own home soil. The war on drugs starts to become a thing. We start to talk about things on the inside, in those unresolved threats that we've had on the southern border with the cartels. They end up in some kind of a gray area where they're being treated like, instead of like a military organizations and terrorists, they're being treated like criminal organizations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the crack cocaine epidemics and all of that. But we're still being prosperous as a nation and a people in our own country. And a lot of our people are dumping money into drugs, though. And those drugs are flooding across the border. And so we're now the ones being exploited.
Exactly. Human Resources Division. And this is the Honorable Charles Rangel, Chairman, Select Committee on Narcotics, Abuse and Control, House of Representatives. The use of crack cocaine reached an epidemic proportions in this country in the end of the 1980s due to unique characteristics associated with crack addiction in the populations that use it. The epidemic created a host of new problems for the public health and drug treatment communities. In view of the devastating social and health effects created by the crack epidemic, you requested that you obtain information by 1, the health consequences of the epidemic, and 2, types of treatment available for crack addicts. Now, this hit the African American community very, very hard. Very hard. And the thing is that I will take this as a reparations treatment over anything that happened in the 60s, because it was in the 60s, at least there was the family unit where they could fight together.
Right.
But this here tore that family unit apart.
Oh, when you have like a shotgun blast of overdoses all the way across your communities.
And arrests.
And arrests.
And arrests and a lot of cops that were just trying to meet quotas that, you know, hey, look at this. Where did this come from? That's not mine. You know, like nowadays, that's, you know, BS. But back then, that was an actual legitimate issue. It was a legitimate issue because a lot of people went to jail for a long time for things that they did not do.
Oh, yeah. And that was common practice with drug enforcement, even like, you know, we've seen the Beatles, right? There were times where they were set up, even though we know they did drugs, right? You know, or they're famous people. They'll try to plant things on them in that way, and so it's even easier to do that to people that don't have the money to fight it. So when you're talking about impoverished communities, after decades of failed domestic policy that was meant to help people that never did, and then you want to send law enforcement on top of them after you've already destroyed them, demoralized them, and everything, that's what happens.
That's how you get Camden, New Jersey.
I wouldn't know. I'll take your word for it.
You should probably look that up. But anyways, that was Past, Present, Future. All right, so that
long
was
story long.
Yeah, long story long. That was part 1. So we've got 2 more episodes of this to start the new year of 2026. outside of that, make sure you go to riseofmiddleamerica.com. Guys, we need to fund this. All right. We want to make this one of the biggest podcast populations here in America. All right. So, riseofmiddleamerica.com. We got all of our ugly faces there. We need to change these photos. We're gonna have a bunch of new stuff coming up soon. But we got a PayPal link here where you can make a monetary contribution to help us become the largest podcast community on the net. We also have here our network of merch. So go ahead and check that out for us as well. And like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification button so that you don't miss a minute of the action. Scrapjaw, it's been a pleasure working with you. I say that as if like you're going somewhere. You're not. But
it's good to be back, sir.
It is good to be back. I am so glad to be back. And we've got a massive year coming in here. We've got a lot of special guests coming in. We're going to try to get some politicians on the show to talk about what they are looking for here for Middle America, not just the left or the right.
How would you like? How would you like to try to talk to somebody running against Vivek as Republican?
Bring their ass here.
If I can get a hold of the guy running against Vivek in the primary,
bring him here.
That would be an interesting conversation. I think it'd be fun before the primary.
Bring him here.
Let's go. It'd be fun.
Let's make it happen. And you give me the information, I'll make it happen. All right. So anyways, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for Roman Nation tonight. Like, comment, and subscribe. Get to us. I'm at the real Roma _AK on X. That's Scrapjaw everywhere, including X. And you guys have yourself a great night. Peace out.